All righty. So we are picking up, we're in chapter 3, more about alcoholism, page 32. Second paragraph from the top starts with a man of 30. Make sure everybody can get there. And I don't know, David, do you want to set up or just sort of give the
Yeah,
context of where we were and where we're going?
yeah, absolutely. I'm David. I'm a recovered alcoholic drug addict. So here we are in chapter 3, more about alcoholism. And as we learn from page 30 of our book, that we learned that we fully conceded our innermost selves that we're alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, presently maybe, has to be smashed. So here we are in this chapter. We're going to see 4 stories. 3 of them are real, semi-real, and one of them is fictitious.
Real-ish.
Okay, real-ish. Okay, so let me just set up the first story here and what we're going to look for. We'll point it out when we're in the middle of the story. The first one here, as David pointed out, page 32, second paragraph. We're going to be talking about the man of 30. So when we're doing that, what I want to look for is, where is the lie, where is the delusion, and where is the insanity, and we'll point that out. And then also, where is the decision and the action that he took? We'll point that out, and then also the outcome, and we'll point that out. So just to kind of set this page up, or this little paragraph up here, the man at 30 was ambitious in business and remained bone dry for 25 years, only to die 4 years after he started drinking. This story is probably adapted from the chapter First Steps in the book, The Common Sense of Drinking by Richard Peabody. So it's a separate book altogether. Bill probably got the story from that because Bill read this story. And if you get the book again, it's The Common Sense of Drinking by Richard Peabody. Rob is just too good. He's got it in the chat already. There's one story on page 37 that speaks of a man, 36 years old, that had been drinking for 16 years, and another story on page 123 regarding a man who gave up drinking to make millions of dollars. Neither of these actually match the story in the big book. The story on page 123 is the one that most closely matches the story in our book. The big discrepancy in the story is the amount of sobriety this man had. The big book speaks of 25 years sobriety, and the others state he had 5 years sober. Some years ago, there lived a man who decided to give up drinking until he could make $1 million, at which time he intended to drink in moderation. It took him 5 years of sobriety to make that $1 million. Then he begins this moderate drinking, in quotations. In tow, in 3 years, he lost his money, and another 3, he died of alcoholism. So that's the setup for that paragraph, or these next following paragraphs of the man of 30.
Okay, thank you. So here we go. Paragraph 2, page 32. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years.
I only have one single definition here, which is robust, and it's described as sturdy and strong. So though a sturdy and strong man retired, or at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was found and was dead within 4 years.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so this story, again, this man of 30, we don't have a name for this guy. So, but later in the stories, we'll see Jim, the car salesman, we'll see Fred, the accountant, and then we'll hear the story of the jaywalker. And those two gentlemen will bookend the jaywalker. So, no name on the man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous. So, Dr. Silkworth would describe that as irritable, restless, and discontent, right? In the morning. And then it says, so as I pointed out to you, I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but I want to point out to you, where the lie, the delusion, the insanity, the decision, the action is, and then what the outcome is in this paragraph. So he was ambitious to succeed in business, so he had a good drive for work, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank. So he could see the truth in that. He knew that alcohol was a problem for him. And once he started, he had no control whatsoever. No control whatsoever. He knew the truth, but let's see what happens with him. He made up his mind, so he made a decision that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55. So think about what that looks like. If I am a raging alcoholic who has some ability to, on my own power, to be able to stop, and he stops for 25 years, am I going to be irritable, restless, and discontent? Well, my experience tells me absolutely I am. So Cameron F. uses the word sobriety instead of sobriety, sobriety, just a dry drunk. And maybe we know some people like that just was able to give up. My dad did that. When my mom had some kind of a brain injury, and he made a deal with the devil, and he stopped drinking for the rest of his life for 25 years. He was irritable as all heck, complained about everything. That's just sobriety. And then points out is, go down towards the bottom of the paragraph there. It says the outcome, so let me point out the truth here first. The first truth in the book is in that paragraph is once he started, he had no control whatsoever. That's the truth, right? You guys identify with that?
Mm-hmm.
And then as we go through this here, he made up his mind. So that not the body, but he made up his mind. Then he fell the victim to belief that particularly every alcoholic has. Here comes the lie, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. That is a lie. That is the delusion. I am not like other people. I can never drink socially again. That'll never happen. And we're going to find out a little bit more about what happens with a cucumber and a pickle in the next paragraph. But I won't spoil that yet. So then here comes the decision and the action. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. And in 2 months, he was in the hospital. So we would call that a hospital or a rehab today. Puzzled and humiliated, he tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips back to the rehab, back to the hospital, and then gathering all his forces. What are forces? That's willpower. On my own willpower, attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. That is the truth. I could not stop on my own willpower. Every means of solving his problems, which money could buy, was at his disposal. What is money? Money is also human aid. Money cannot buy spiritual conditioning. I could be the richest man in the world, but if I'm suffering from alcoholism, I will not be able to stop on all the money in the world, on human aid. I'm beyond human aid. And every attempt failed, though robust, so he's in good shape at retirement. He went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. That's the outcome. That's what happens to us when we start to drink after 25 years, 5 years, 6 months, 3 months. It doesn't matter what it is. But here's a guy who was able to take a hiatus for 25 entire years, and he started right where he left off, and it was 4 years he was dead. The outcome of that would have been the same if he would have continued his drinking when he started, when he left off 25 years prior.
This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could therefore drink normally. But here's a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we're in a short time as bad as ever. If we're planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol.
I have a couple definitions here.
Mhm.
I have lurking, notion, and immune. Lurking is defined as secret or hidden. Notion is an idea. And then immune is exempt from punishment, protected against a disease. So in the sentence, if we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any secret or hidden idea that someday we will be protected against this disease or to alcohol.
Thanks, Sam. So before David sort of continues, explaining the story here and the considerations in it, I just want to take the opportunity to do one of the exercises we love doing as we go through the book. So this paragraph is filled with a lot of statements. Let's take the opportunity as we look to personalize the content and turn these statements into questions. Right? So it says, most of us have believed that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could therefore drink normally. I'd ask myself, at this point in my recovery, do I believe that if I remain sober for a long time, eventually I can drink normally? Or does that idea have to be smashed? Right? So do I think if I stop drinking for a while and then I start again, will I be able to control it? Or are we going to have the same experience as this guy? Am I going to pick up right back where I started? And frankly, if you were anything like me, if you had some periods where you were able to stop, which I had lots of periods I stopped. The problem was I always started again. When I started again, I didn't pick up right back where I left off. It was always increased. It was always magnified. It was like my obsession was trying to make up for lost time. And how about this truth? Do I believe this? Once I'm an alcoholic, am I always an alcoholic? Do I outgrow my alcoholism? Right? If I'm dry long enough, if I'm sober long enough, hell, if I'm recovered long enough, am I no longer alcoholic? Am I cured? And how about this? When I was planning to stop drinking, or if you're new and you're still asking yourself this consideration, do I want to stop drinking? Is the first question. Do I want to plan to stop drinking? Do I have any reservations of any kind? And this might be tricky, Sam, to find the right definition of reservation. Maybe see if you can find that. All right. Do I have any reservations? Am I holding on to any lurking notions that someday I'm going to become immune to alcohol? One of the things I love best about how Bill writes is he comes up with really important ideas and then he bludgeons us about the head over and over to make sure these thoughts and these concepts are really beaten into us because we're thick-headed. And if you listen to how I don't know how good of a job I did, but as I was trying to take these statements and reread them and turn them into questions, he's asking the same thing over and over. It's, do I believe I'm an alcoholic now and will always be an alcoholic? He's not saying, do I believe I'm going to drink again? We have a whole room full of alcoholics and addicts that don't ever have to drink or drug again, right? But he wants to make sure I'm not holding on to something. Just one day, maybe. When I used to go to a treatment center years ago when I lived in the city, at this bridge group meeting, I remember I was talking to this guy and he was holding on to this reservation. We're talking about, hey man, this is quitting drinking for good and all. This is the whole idea, planning to stop drinking. He said, you mean I can never have another drink? I said, well, why would you want to drink? Well, what about when my daughter gets married? I can't have a glass of champagne? Guess how old his daughter was at the time he said this? 2. 2-year-old infant daughter. He was worried about having a glass of champagne when she got married in what, 20, 30 years, right? He was still in the insanity. He was still in the obsession. Go ahead, David.
So there starts out with that paragraph that says, this contains a powerful lesson. So something I need to pay attention to. See, when we read this book, for me, when I see stories, the back of the book or in Bill's story or Fred's story or the Man of 30 or Jim's story, whatever it is, Did I drink, think, or feel like that person? And that's where the powerful lesson comes from. Yes, I drank just like him. I had abstinence from alcohol, and I have just as big a problem with abstinence as I do with alcohol, because I become irritable, restless, discontented. So able to say we had stretches of sobriety. I had stretches of sobriety for myself, for external purposes only, to get her off, my mama off my back, to get my job back, to pay the bills and stuff like that. But I always went back to the drink. Not why? Not because I chose to, because I had no power, no choice, no control. So I'm going to use my demonstration here and my example of once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Matter of fact, tonight I had cucumbers with my dinner. And if I would have taken those cucumbers tonight and I would have put them in brine, they would have turned into a pickle. And if I would have put that pickle on the shelf and let it dry out a little bit, how soon would that turn back into a cucumber? Oh, never. Once a pickle, always a pickle. And I'm always going to be an alcoholic and a drug addict for the rest of my life. And I have to remind myself that quite often. And the way I do that for me is I get on my knees every day and I ask God to keep me clean and sober and to direct my thinking. And then I have to perform the actions in the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. Bottom of that paragraph, it says, if we are planning to stop drinking, so that must be a plan of action. When I ask someone else to take me through this work, that for me is an action. There must be no reservations of any kind, no lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol. And David's example is beautiful. I love that the guy's daughter's 2 years old, right? I mean, geez, isn't that alcoholic thinking for sure? It's like, oh my goodness, you're selling this program and God, putting limits on God and putting limits on what this program can do for you if you just give your whole self to this thing. And I had a guy who I was sponsoring, he's been sponsoring for over 20 years now. He's still sober today. I remember the first week I sponsored him, he said, and this was like in April, I believe it was. And in August, his wife was going to go out of town on a business trip. And he goes, I think in August, I'm probably going to drink again. I go, dude, you're going to trip on that threshold on the way out the door and you're going to drink tonight with that. You can't have a reservation. It's like, come on. It's like, I got all I got. And I was talking to one of my guys today. It's like, he was thinking about drinking. I said, so right now, where are you at right now? Like, where are you at? And how are you feeling right now after our conversation day? In this moment, how are you feeling? He goes, well, I feel better. I go, how about this moment? How about this moment? Dude, this is a moment. Get on your knees, ask God to keep you clean and sober. Call your sponsor, call someone in the program, have a meeting set up for yourself. It's like, dude, I got to be willing to go to any lengths. I can't have any reservation whatsoever.
I have the definition of reservations. It's
Lay it
defined
on
as
us.
a limiting condition or limitation.
Give us that in a sentence then, can you? Like you
Yeah.
usually do?
If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no limitations of any kind, nor any secret hidden ideas that we will someday be protected against this disease.
Thank you, Sam. Guys, think about what is being said here. The setup, the condition, the ask is, if we are planning to stop drinking, I think we don't need to look up the definition of stop. I think we all know what that means. It's like we don't do it anymore. If we're planning to stop drinking, not if we're planning to stop drinking today, not that I'm going to plan to stop drinking a day at a time. This is not a don't drink, don't drug, don't act out in whatever my addiction is one day at a time. No. We live life one day at a time. We plan to stop drinking, to stop drugging forever. This is the conceit, without limitations, without, well, I will stop drinking unless this happens. Well, unless what happens? Unless we get cancer? Our good buddy Eddie had cancer in his kidney, cancer in his bladder. He'd been sober a year and a half. Did he consider drinking? He did not. He had the kidney removed and he had the bladder surgery, and he went through it with God and grace in this program and all of us. And I bet a lot of other people here have seen that in friends in recovery too. What are the conditions? What are the limits? Well, what if I lose my job? Well, what if I lose my wife or my husband? What if I get sick? Well, what if someone I care about dies? Well, what if? It's the most remedial concept in the world. Is starting to drink or drug again going to make that situation any better? Of course not. Why would we hold on to something so foolish? Right? And no lurking notion, no secret idea that someday we will be immune to alcohol. I would rather
Good.
assume I don't have this immunity. I'd rather get to my grave and get to heaven and meet the gatekeeper there. He says, "Oh, you know what? You were cured at some point. You could have been drinking and doing coke the last 30 years." I would rather be told that once I'm dead than to take that chance now and find out I can't. And by the way, because I'm spiritually fit and I'm safe and protected by God, having a drink, having a drug doesn't even sound like a good time. That's living neutral. That's safe and protected. That's the goal. That my life is not about, oh, I don't drink or I drink. It's about purposeful, meaningful, useful living, right? Outside of self.
Yes. So in the 12 and 12 in step 7 on page 73, I caught Rob by off guard on that one. I bet.
Yeah, he's probably got it.
He's got it.
Yeah.
So, second full paragraph, it says, when we have finally admitted without reservation that we are powerless over alcohol, we are apt to breathe a great sigh of relief, saying, well, thank God that's over. I never have to go through that again. Conceding and learning to my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic means I don't have to have a reservation here. Thank God that's over. Why? Number one, the first part of the first step says I'm powerless over alcohol, cocaine, heroin, whatever my drug of no choices. But the second part is my life is unmanageable. I have fired myself from my management position. I am no longer running my life on my own free will. That is my problem. And now I have conceded to learn in my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic. And on my power, I will not be successful at any of this stuff.
Well, first of all, I'm impressed that David took us to the 12 and 12, my man. Just to continue that thought, just because you went there, I just got to continue the thought because it's apropos as well. When we finally admitted without reservation that we're powerless over alcohol, we're apt to breathe a great sigh of relief, saying, well, thank God that's over. I'll never have to go through that again. I'll never have to drink again. Then we learn, often to our consternation, that this is only the first milestone on the new road we were walking. Still goaded by sheer necessity, we reluctantly come to grips with those serious character flaws that made problem drinkers of us in the first place. There's more going on here than the drink or the drug or the cutting or the eating or the whatever, guys. Carrying on, we're at page 33, second paragraph. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop, as he did, on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it because none will really want to stop. And hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who'd been drinking 20 years. And we've got some representation of that tonight. We got Sam and Ashton still in their like early mid-20s. Heather is, I think, 37, but she's been banging around here for 15 years, right? Some of us lose all control quite early.
Yeah, alcohol and drugs, if you're a real addict, does not discriminate. I've sponsored guys that have been 14 years old, and I've sponsored guys that have been 80 years old. It doesn't matter, man or woman, or whatever your proper pronoun is, doesn't matter. And then it says in there that peculiar mental twist right in the middle of that paragraph. That's the obsession of the mind. That's what we're talking about here. That is the greater problem of this illness here. It's not, when I abstain from alcohol, I cannot break out in craving, but I have this obsessive mind. You know, and remember what an obsession is. Without my thought, without my consent, well, it is a thought. An obsession is a thought. So a thought is different, a little bit different than an obsession. A thought happens. I can do something with that thought. As a matter of fact, one of my guys down here tonight, he had a thought. He didn't pray, even though he's going to do it next time, right, buddy? Pray first, then call your sponsor, call somebody else. then have a meeting set up and all these other things. So that was a thought. But if it was an obsession, override all my good thinking, sounds just like me in my head, tells me to go for it, tells me F it, whatever it tells me to do, I believe that delusion that I can drink like a normal person, or I just say F it. Or I don't think anything at all. Sometimes I don't think anything at all. So what were you thinking 2 minutes before you pick up a drink? That's what I got to know. And today you didn't have to. And I got to do that. I got to be willing to go to any lengths all day long. No matter what age I am, what color I am, what sexual orientation I am, does not matter whatsoever. That peculiar mental twist gets removed by a power greater than myself, not by me.
Turn these statements into questions. Do I think I can stop on my own willpower, as the man of 30 did? Have I already acquired the peculiar mental twist? Do I have the obsession? Have I found myself, if I'm young, again, maybe like a Sam or an Ashton, if I found myself as helpless as those who'd been drinking 20 years? All of these statements, turn them into questions, qualify myself. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantities some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere. But try and get them to see it. And then there's a little footnote, and I'm sure everybody's going to have a different footnote based on the edition and the printing. Mine says, true when this book was first published, but in 2004, almost 20 years ago, US-Canada membership survey showed about 1/9 of AAs were 30 and under. And this was 20 years ago.
So
I did. Oh, sorry. I'll let you go, Sam.
Okay, I just have one quick definition. It's the word is gravely, and it is described as deathly. So to be deathly affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time nor take the quantities some of us had. And then also, I just thought it was a fun little thing. It said, in the footnote here, in the first edition, it read feminine instead of potential female alcoholics. I just thought that was kind of cool.
Okay. It's an important
Yeah.
distinction, especially
Go
these
ahead,
days.
Go ahead, Ashton, please.
I just had a few comments I wanted to make. So I kind of want to comment on the fact that it says how like it tends to be that women kind of have a higher chance of becoming alcoholics quicker than men, and that's typically because of how, as women, how they like alcohol affects them stronger, just because of their body is a lot different than men. Like we're smaller physiologically, like decreased muscle and everything, which is why typically it tends to be that women have a higher effect of becoming alcoholics sooner. And then I did want to mention, so I started trying to do some more research past few days about the percentage of, I apparently threw out my note card that had it, but going through the AA websites, if I remember correctly, for 2021, the last data that they did for people younger than 30, I think the percentage was 11% that was documented. But I was also looking at the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism website. And this was 2021 as well, 900,000 people were surveyed from the age of 12 to 17, and 3.4% of them were diagnosed with alcoholism. And then another interesting fact, again, this was a 2021 study. This was like over 15 million people that they took data from. And alcohol causes 14% of deaths among 20 to 36-year-olds.
Thank you, Ashton.
Yeah,
If
thank you
you're
very much.
new, in addition to being our sort of medical testimonial and dictionary person, Ash's job is as an ICU nurse. And so she has got some good perspective, both as what she sees and experiences. Last week, she was regaling us with having witnessed people in the ICU drinking things like hand sanitizer, trying to catch a buzz firsthand. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to this other than I was having a conversation with Sam. David had a party over the weekend. A bunch of us came over. We were sitting there sharing about women and drinking and being young and drinking. And I remember her sharing this story with me. I don't know if this really happened to you, or if you heard another person say this to a younger female in the fellowship. But an old grouchy guy with about 30 or 40 years of sobriety looked over at her and looked at her and says, I probably spill more alcohol in my tie than you ever drank in your life. That does not qualify you to be more of an alcoholic. Don't say that kind of stuff. I grew up in AA like that, where guys wouldn't let me even talk in meetings sometimes. It's not true. It's not true at all. If I break out in craving once I take a drink, or if I have this, and I have an obsessive mind, then I'm an alcoholic, period. Doesn't matter if I don't drink as much as you drink, or I don't do as much dope as you do. That has nothing to do as a qualifier. And we can when we get to page 44, we'll take a peek at that then. That's all I got there, David.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue on. Top of 34.
Mm-hmm.
As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our willpower. If anyone questions whether he's entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. If he's a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there's a scant chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks.
So first, before the comma, as we look back, so we're talking about the first 100 there. And then we skip the rest of that sentence and go to, if anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. This is the mental obsession test. So on page 31, bottom of page 31 into 32 was the allergy test. To have a couple of drinks at the same time every day, and see if you can just do that for 30 days. Here's the obsession. This is the one I prefer you try. If you got to try something other than totally like surrendering to the fact that you're a real alcoholic, admitting to your innermost self, try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. I don't want to be your spouse when you're doing that, but good luck with that, or your employer. I don't think that's going to look too pretty. But try and give it a chance. But they kind of break it down how it's going to work out for you. We think down the bottom of the paragraph, we think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk a day after making this resolution. How many people make New Year's resolutions and you break it? Dude, I made a resolution after David's party. I wasn't going to eat sugar anymore. And 2 days in, I'm eating sugar the other night. I had to have sugar, man. And I did it in moderation. I don't have an overeaters problem yet today, but I do have a drink and drug problem, right? So I can do some things in moderation. But when it comes to this paragraph here, this is the obsession test. Can you leave it alone for an entire year?
I don't have any data on this. It might be available somewhere, but I'll encourage everybody this. Go to a meeting every day the week after New Year's and note how full they are. I've been experiencing this for 20 years. There's always a whole lot of people, a whole lot of new faces that week after New Year's. And all of a sudden, they will start lightening back up second and third week into January. A lot of resolutions. right? But a lot of people coming into meetings, and some of them don't need to be there. Again, maybe they're hard drinkers, or they just been getting in a little bit of trouble, going through a bad patch. But there's a whole lot of real alcoholics and real addicts coming to our meetings that aren't getting the right message either, right? So when you have that experience in that first week, go talk to those sick-looking people. And it's good. So again, ask yourself these questions. Did I go on drinking many years beyond the point that I could quit on my own willpower? Was that my experience? Did I have that thought and sensation? Right? Did I ever try leaving liquor alone for a year? I mean, David was sort of making light of that. I wasn't dry off everything for I don't know, more than a couple days at a shot. I could stop drinking, no problem, but I was picking up the cocaine. I could stop the cocaine, no problem, but I was picking up the ecstasy. I could stop the ecstasy, no problem, but I was picking up the weed. There was always something. Had to have something. Bone dry was probably measured in hours, maybe days if I was lucky. Right? So as a real alcoholic, am I a real alcoholic? Am I very far advanced? Am I going to have a scant chance of success to just drop it and just go dry? All right, let's continue on. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We're assuming, of course, the reader desires to stop. Ask the question. As I'm reading this, as I'm studying, do I want to stop? Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Let me read this again. I want these words to sink in. So if somebody is in the position that they cannot drink moderately, figure they got to stop, assuming they want to stop, whether such a person can quit drinking upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he'll drink or not. Many of us felt we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. The utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish. Sam, anything? No? Okay, so I just want to make sure this is really, I mean, everything's important, right? But this is a really pivotal paragraph here. And I want to make sure we're not getting lost in any of the language. So let me just sort of modernize it and simplify it a little bit here. It's saying, okay, if I can't control and moderate my drinking, the question is, how do I stop? And the assumption is that I do want to stop. And that's different for different people at different times of their drinking. There's probably a number of people here who came to AA or whatever your fellowship is early, maybe banged around for a few weeks, a few months, went back out and came back a decade later, and then you got it. All right? So there's a point at which I got to decide, yeah, I want to stop. And then here's the big consideration. Okay, so I do want to stop. Can I just do it with willpower? Or do I need what this book is talking about for 174 pages? Do I need a spiritual experience, a spiritual path, a spiritual awakening to stop? And the answer to whether or not I know if I'm going to need a spiritual solution is, can I choose whether or not I drink? And really, this paragraph is a setup. It's a setup to prove that really I can't choose. If I'm this far from the doctor's opinion plus 34, 44 pages in and I'm still reading, I probably lost choice in drink. And then what it says, when it goes on to say, many of us felt we have plenty of character, that means we thought we were good people. We thought we were capable of making good decisions. We thought that we knew right from wrong, and we understood, okay, this drinking thing is getting out of control. So I should use how I was raised by my parents, everything I learned in school to be able to stop. Okay. But those things are not spiritual in nature, right? That's knowledge, that's nurture. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever. So I really want to stop. My life is such a mess. Yet we found it impossible. I tried to stop forever, but I keep drinking. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism, this utter inability to leave it alone. David brought it up, right? We're thick in the mental obsession here. The greater part of the illness, the greater part of the powerlessness component of the illness, the complete inability. I completely am unable to leave the alcohol alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish or consequences. In the face of consequences, when I am not recovered, I pick up.
Yeah, this paragraph answers a lot of questions why I drink when I don't want to. So it also is talking about there whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis. So we're talking about a malady too here. We're talking about a malady is an illness, a sickness, a disorder, condition. Now the spirit was not ill. The condition means that I was in conflict or disordered condition with the spirit. The spiritual malady is a result of my being out of order with my higher power, who I choose to call God. I'm the manager, the director of my life. How's that going for you? That's the question I got to ask myself here. Break that paragraph down. How are you doing managing your own life on your own power? Can you stop drinking on your own power? How are you doing managing your own life on your own power? So what is a director? We'll find out later in the book. A person who's in charge of an activity, a department, or an organization. I'm not doing so well with that stuff there. This malady, me being out of order with the spirit of the world, this God, my creator, whatever it is the reason I need him in my life. I need to find a power. We'll get into that as we get into chapter 4, We Agnostics. We'll talk about it. He'll elaborate on that greatly. The whole chapter is devoted to that. But this is the paragraph is really showing me why do I drink even when I don't want to drink? Because of the malady, because of the obsession, and because of the craving.
Bottom of 34. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they're one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. For obviously, this is the crux of the problem.
I have some definitions here.
Please.
I have render, which is described as translate to furnish for consideration in action. So translate, I mean, is one kind of definition, and then to furnish for consideration or action. This experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can translate an even greater service to the alcoholic sufferers, and perhaps to the medical fraternity. And fraternity is just men of the same class, profession, or interest, not the fraternity that we know today. Fraternities. And then also I have the definition of crux, which is anything very puzzling or difficult to explain. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precedes a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the this is difficult to explain part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ed.
So,
Go ahead, Dave.
okay, so when I look at this thing, the first sentence there says, how then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they're one of us? So I think he's explaining a little bit more in detail here. This is a really hard book for me to read, especially new coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, DA, whatever A you're in. This is a book that's a textbook. It's meant to be read and studied. So, and preferably with someone that has some knowledge of this book. And I've done tens of thousands of hours. I study with Howard on Sunday and Kathy. And then I've done, when I'm in my truck for years, I listen to Joe Hawk, and I listen to all these guys that were so versed in the book. It just attracted me to it. So I have a better understanding what this nature of this disease looks like, and also the hope that comes with complete defeat, because that's what I need to have. And then it says on the next page on top of 35, so we shall describe some of the mental states that precede the relapse into drinking, for obviously there's a crux of the problem. So the root of the problem is self. We're going to find that out later in the book on page 63, but let's find out more as we keep reading here. So they describe the state that precedes a relapse into drinking.
Yeah, let's just look at a little bit of the language here, a bit more too. So important. The first sentence here is, and this is our duty too, as we're working with somebody new who's just showing up, in a room of recovery. How do we help a newcomer determine to their own satisfaction whether they're one of us, right? So the book was written to the experience of the first 100 or so. This is their experience, their 12-step call to us. Here's how we suffered, and here's how we got better. And then you decide if you're like us, right? But the qualification has to come from me, right? It's my program recovery. It's my internal problem. It's going to be my internal solution that I'm going to court. You can't tell me. And by the way, when I first came in, I'm sure when each of you first came in, how open were we for somebody else to tell us we had a problem? Not terribly, right? I've got to come to this conclusion on my own. And then it goes on to say, listen, you could try this idea. You could try this experiment of quitting for a period of time, and that might be helpful. But we want to spare you that. We're going to share our experience of what we've learned, and that hopefully is going to help not only the newcomers, but also maybe the medical fraternity, the medical brotherhood. It's sort of an old-fashioned way of saying it, Sam. It's a little bit of the old boys club. They would use a different word this day for sure. They'd probably say the medical community, right? Sort of non-gendery. So we're going to help explain what it looks like right before people pick up again, before they relapse into drinking, because starting again is the most difficult part of the problem. Like we've said this so many times tonight, the greater part of the powerlessness is the mental powerlessness where we pick up. The physical, guys, I still have the allergic reaction, but it never gets activated because I don't put anything in my body to trigger it. I don't have to worry about the physical powerlessness. The mental powerlessness is a little something different. I got to keep that at bay by staying spiritually fit. Right? That's why it's a greater part of the puzzle. So what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree, which have brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy, are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Yeehaw, saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking?
Did he think at all?
Yeah.
Or did he think at all? What were you thinking 2 minutes? What were you feeling? What were you thinking 2 minutes before you picked the drink? And in my case, I wasn't thinking nothing at all. I had no power, no choice, no control. So if you hang on to the page 35 and go back to page 23, where we started this paragraph on page 25, first paragraph. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Here's the point. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Need to know that. And the main problem centers in my mind and not my body. So what was I thinking 2 minutes before I picked up that drink or that drug? In my case, I wasn't thinking at all. So I have no mental defense against that first one.
So what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time that desperate experiment of the first drink? So Bill's used experiment a couple times in a row. You know, when he repeats words, he's trying to make a point or smash home some concept. So this kind of thinking doesn't occasionally occur to us. It doesn't influence us a little bit. It dominates our thinking, right? And then we repeat time after time after time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink. Why is that the desperate experiment of the first drink? Because we're trying over and over with the hope, on a prayer, on a thread, on a wish that I'm going to have the first drink and at this time I'm going to be okay. That maybe I'll have the second and maybe I'll have the third, but I'm not going to have the 22nd or the 23rd. Right? And then friends of reason with us be like, David, you can't keep doing this. You're killing yourself. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose all of us. We can't be around you when you're doing this. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I know. I got to stop. I got to get responsible. And then they watch me go back into the bar or pick up the phone and call the dealer. Why do I do it? Ask yourself, why do I do it? What am I thinking? And David asked the right question. Was he even thinking? If you were anything like me, you had periods of blackout is a particular meaning in the alcoholic community, right? But I would have dry blackouts, dry thinking blackouts, where I'd be stone sober, dry, not a thing in my body. It'd be Tuesday night, and I had enough money in the bank account to pay rent on Friday. And someone called me on Tuesday and said, hey man, I got an extra 8-ball. Do you want it? And I was in the car, cash in hand, to the dealers, picked up, back home. And it's like I wasn't even there for the journey, right? Money spent, gonna float a check on Friday for the rent. No thinking at all. Pure autopilot. And with that, we're a couple minutes shy of the top of the hour, but we should stop because we're going to get into Jim's story.
I agree.